Welcome to episode 39 of the Courageous Nation podcast. I'm really excited to piggyback off of what we began to talk about in episode 38, which was you. We were having a discussion about you, whether you realized it or not. We were talking about happiness, in particular, your happiness. And I want to begin by asking that question of you again. Are you a happy person? Are you a happy person? Do you have a reputation with other people for being happy? And more importantly, do you have a reputation before God of being a happy person? My name's Michael Anthony, and you can find out more about me at michaelanthonyofficial.com and, of course, couragematters.com. I want to jump in right here and talk about happiness, because there are actually things within your ability that you can impact, that you can influence, that you can change, which have everything to do with your happiness. And not only your happiness, but once you learn how to do these things, once you learn how to become a happier person, you'll be able to help your spouse if you're married, or maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend if you're in a relationship, maybe your children. That's an especially important thing. If you're a parent or a guardian, you need to be able to help your children become happy people and learn how to be happy people. I'm going to talk about joy in a moment too, that there's a difference between being happy and being joyful. There's a difference between the two of those, and I'm going to make a distinction between those during this episode so that you understand and you're able to be a happy and a joyful person. You need to be able to influence your children so that your children are happy people. What about your parents? Many of us grow up in the course of life, and we actually, as children, end up being the parent for our parents. And if you understand what I'm saying, a lot of times the roles are reversed there, not intentionally, but oftentimes our parents did not grow up emotionally. They did not have, or they do not have, the emotional intelligence, the emotional fortitude and strength that you developed in your life. And so sometimes the roles get reversed, they get flip-flopped. And you think about your place of employment or your neighborhood, wherever you are. Today, more than ever, people are negative, they're naysayers, they're depressed, they're discouraged. And listen, I get it, especially in light of what we've gone through for the past 18 months in the United States of America and around the world. I get it. It is harder to be a happy person, a joy-filled person today than perhaps at any other time in recent history. And the great news is that you can actually become a happier person by being intentional with the things that we're going to talk about today. And it has to do with your posture, your facial expressions, and your words and your attitude. I'm going to help you understand that there's a lot more that you can do that you might not have realized that you can do about affecting your emotional state than you have given credit to yourself for doing. And listen, there are things in the course of our lives that we cannot affect, we cannot impact, we cannot influence in any way, shape, or form. I'm not talking about those things. Let's put those things over here, right? There are things that happen in the course of our lives, things that people do to us, things that people say to us, events that happen to us in our lives that we have absolutely no say in affecting. They happen to us. Life is what happens to us oftentimes when we're making other plans. But God is sovereign. He is in control, even when, and especially when, you are out of control. And you have to understand that, but that does not absolve you. It does not absolve you or me. It does not absolve us for taking 100% responsibility of our lives. And listen, as a Christ follower, as somebody who was involved in pastoral ministry for nearly 2 decades, as a Christian, an unapologetic Christian, I know from firsthand experience and from counseling other people that oftentimes what we do is we drop back and we punt and we give a responsibility to God. We blame God. You know, you can blame God without having an overtly negative attitude. What I mean is you're giving a responsibility to God and leaving something up to Him when actually God gave it to you to steward and to take care of. And one of the things that we Christians are terrible at doing is we chalk up the circumstances of our life, what's happened to us, as simply the sovereignty of God, when actually God might not listen to me on this. Please listen to me on this, because this could change your life right here. When in reality, it might not be as much of the responsibility of God. It might not be because God caused it to happen, as much as you made choices that you might not even realize you've been making that have actually created the circumstance you are now in. You can be a happier person if you're intentional. Let's talk about a few things, because it's really important to understand how the mind works. And most of what we understand about how the mind works has come to us, believe it or not, in the past 2 decades of human existence. Now, it doesn't mean that there weren't things in ancient times that were understood and then lost. I believe that there's some truth to that very possibly we knew a lot more many years ago, and we lost that information with the age of automation and computerization of society. We lost the ability to use our minds for ourselves, because we became, and we have become, a society that's more dependent upon technology. Our smartphones, for example, which have, in very real instances, dumbed us down. We rely upon technology oftentimes more than the ability to use our own brains. But I want to help you understand that within the past 2 decades, psychologists and psychological breakthroughs have come where we understand more about how the mind works, how the emotions work, the connection between how the mind works and how we feel. We understand that more now than at any other time in history. So if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, if you're somebody who's dedicated to unleashing your life, and that's what the Courageous Nation podcast is about. It's about unleashing your life, unleashing your potential, living without self-imposed limits. You may have been limiting your happiness because of the decisions that you've been making, and you might not even be aware that you've been making these decisions. So buckle up, get that 4-point harness on, because I want to help you understand that there is a direct correlation between your posture, how you hold yourself, how you stand, how you sit, whether you slouch, whether you're hunched over, and your attitude, your happiness, your joy. Now, before we go any further, let me make a distinction here between joy and happiness, because life is not just about pursuing happiness. In many circles, people think that if it feels good, do it, and that's all about happiness, just getting an emotional high. And there are many people who are happiness junkies. That's why they spend too much money, they get themselves into debt, they're shopping junkies, they choose drugs, they choose alcohol, they choose sex, they choose relationships to simply fill a void in their lives that cannot be filled by things. It can only be filled with a relationship, a right relationship with God. Very, very crucial for you to understand this, that there is a relationship between how you hold yourself in your posture and your attitude of gratitude and your joy. The difference between happiness and joy is that you can be a person who's grieving and yet have joy. You can be a person who's experiencing tremendous financial difficulty, relational difficulty, and yet have joy. And that joy comes from walking with God, who is more committed to walking with you than you're even committed to walking with him. It's really true. And if you don't believe that, you don't understand the cross. That God didn't wait for you to respond. He didn't wait for me to respond. He took the initiative upon himself, left the exalted place of honor, humbled himself, and reached out and pursued you. That's God's message to you. You have to understand, I really want you to understand that there's a difference between joy and happiness. We can feel happy when somebody gives us a gift, but yet we can not necessarily be abiding in the joy of God. The joy of the Lord, the scriptures say, is our strength. Are you a strong person or are you a weak person? Are you somebody who's addicted to happiness, or are you somebody who's committed to joy? Joy is to have an abiding sense of peace and groundedness and certainty in the character and the nature of God, that God's going to come through. God's going to deliver what he promises, do what he says. He's going to be on time. He's never late, regardless of the circumstances. See, if you are a joy-filled person, You will not be a happiness junkie, and you'll be somebody who's impervious to the circumstances in life and to what happens to you, because you realize that your joy and your groundedness and your security and your strength is not wrapped up in things. It's not wrapped up in circumstances. It is wrapped up in a person and a relationship with the living and true God. So you can have joy even if you're not experiencing happiness. You really, honestly, honest to God, you can. If you're scratching your head and saying, I don't know what that's all about, and I want to encourage you to draw near to God, He will draw near to you. That is a promise from God Himself. And you can look this up in the Bible for yourself. Listen, I'm not in the Courageous Nation podcast holding your hand and putting up scriptures on the screen. If you're watching on your our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Michael Anthony Official. If you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, you can also watch on my YouTube channel, and make sure you like and you subscribe and you hit the bell, all that stuff, so you don't miss anything. But I want you to understand that in the course of your life, you've got to get this thing about life figured out, where it's promised in Scripture that you will seek me. God says you'll seek me and find me when you seek for me with your whole heart. If you engage in half-hearted seeking of God, you will have a half-hearted experience of joy and peace and groundedness. I can tell you that having experienced the death of my mother, the death of my father, and being there when both of them passed, being a cancer survivor with a softball-sized tumor around my chest, escaping death at least 4 times in my own life, there is a peace and there is a joy, an abiding peace and a joy that you can experience in the course of your life regardless of your circumstances, that you can face horrific circumstances and still be filled with joy. So there's a difference, there's a distinction between joy and happiness. But I do want to get to this issue of, as I'm making this clear, about how you experience joy by drawing near to God and walking with Him. That's how you get that constant joy, that constant peace, that constant abiding with God leads you to become impervious to life's circumstances. So that's a promise for you. That's a bonus I'm giving to you today. But I want to get to this issue of happiness, because happiness is an emotional state that is directly affected. We now know that this is the truth. We know this to be the truth. It is affected by your posture. If you're hunched over, if you have shoulders that are drawn forward, we've all seen people, we've all been guilty of it, especially today where we spend so much time looking down at our devices and on a laptop, at a desktop, keyboard, typing away. Our shoulders can get rounded and hunched forward, and we slouch in our seats. What you don't necessarily understand and realize, and this is what's so freeing and so empowering about this, is that your body posture, if you're hunched over, if your shoulders are rounded and you're slouching, it actually affects your happiness and your mental outlook in life. So, this is the thing I want you to understand. Oftentimes we think it's the exact opposite. We think, well, I need to change my emotional state, and that's going to make me feel better. Well, that becomes this cyclical, difficult thing. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to work on taking your thoughts captive, and I've talked about this in past podcasts. I've talked about this before live audiences. You're supposed to take captive every thought, not every other thought. The Bible says, take captive every thought and make it obedient. But in addition, what if there was something that you could do with your posture that had everything to do with your attitude and your happiness? The great news is, this is what I'm telling you, there is something that you can do. Be conscious of your posture, whether you're slouching, whether your shoulders are rounded in. Be conscious of that and recognize that if you change your posture, you can actually change your mental state. It does not necessarily happen instantaneously, but if in the course of a day, think about it this way, if in the course of a given day, you are committed to standing upright, to making sure that you're not slouching, you will begin to see, with one day folding into the next day and folding into the next, you will begin to see, I'm telling you, I've done it in my own life. I know other people who have done it in their lives. You will see a change in your emotional state, from depressed and sad and angry and discouraged to increasing happiness. Don't expect it to happen overnight, but at the same time, the more you're conscious of your body posture and the more you take it seriously as a direct way to impact your emotional state, the better you're going to be at changing your emotional state just like that. I'm not kidding you. You might say to yourself, that sounds like a bunch of psychological gobbledygook. Listen, it's not psychological gobbledygook. It is the way that God Almighty designed you, and now we know more about that than we've ever known before with psychological study after psychological study, case study after case study. We know that to be the case now more than ever, that there is a correlation between your posture and your mental outlook and your happiness. So if you want to change your happiness, if you want to change your emotional state, take note of your posture and be more dedicated. Take 100% responsibility for your posture. There you go. I'm giving that to you as a gift. You can affect positively or negatively your emotional state by nothing other than your posture. The second way that you can affect your emotional state is by using these hundreds of muscles in your face for a great way to reflect where you want to be in regard to your emotional state. What I mean is this. Instead of allowing your emotional state to dictate the expression on your face, reverse it, because we also know that this is true as well. This is a mind hack. The way that God has designed you, you can use this to your advantage. If you want to change what's going on the inside of you emotionally, change what's happening on the outside with your facial expression. It's the exact opposite of what you think. People say, well, I can't help the way I look on my face with my lips turned upside down. Looks like I have a frown. A lot of people look like they're sucking on lemons. And they should open up a lemonade factory for that matter. Their facial expression is reflecting what's happening on their inner emotional state. But what if I told you, and I am telling you this, that research now helps us understand that if you're conscious in changing the expression on your face, using these hundreds of muscles to smile, if you're intentional about putting a smile on your face, you will actually change and positively impact your emotional state. And who couldn't use an emotionally positive boost in light of what we've been experiencing in the country and in the world for the past 18 months, right? That's fantastic news when you stop and think about it. Think about this. If you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling discouraged, God has wired you with the ability to change your emotional state by changing the facial expression that you have. In other words, instead of being reactive to your emotions and letting your emotions function as if they're the engine on the train. You understand what I'm saying by that? See, a train has an engine and a caboose. The emotions are the caboose. The engine are your thoughts and your posture and your facial expressions. That's what we're talking about here. Instead of letting your emotions dictate what's happening on your face, reverse it. Before you wait to feel a certain way emotionally, make a dedicated decision to change your facial expression from a frown to a smile. Make it your ambition to walk around with a smile on your face, and you will literally begin to change your attitude from an attitude of discouragement, despair, and I'm not talking about this in a surfacey way. Listen, I've experienced deep-seated depression myself. I've counseled people who've gone through deep-seated depression. I've experienced counseling myself for going through periods of depression in my own life. I'm not saying that you don't need help when you need clinical help, but what I am saying is that you might not need the kind of help to the degree to which you think you need if you haven't at least tried working on your posture and working on your facial expression. If you do these two things by themselves, give it a shot, not just for a day or two, not just for a week, but write it down, be committed. Put Post-it notes around your house, in your car that say smile. and make it your ambition to smile with a big smile on your face to the point where other people will ask you, what are you smiling about? I'm telling you, I'm promising you, you're going to email me. You're going to go to CourageMatters.com and you're going to email me and you're going to say, Mike, you're absolutely right. What you said was absolutely true. Just by changing my facial expression, I've actually changed my emotional state. I'm telling you that that's the way that it works. That's the way it works. Your body posture, your facial expressions, these are external things that you get to decide with your own mind, with your own heart, just by a decision that you make. They're things that have to do with your physiology, the way you present yourself, that actually go deeper than the external part of who you are, than just by looking at you on the surface, and they affect who you are at a deeper level. So just your body posture and your facial expressions. Make notes for yourself. Be dedicated. Be 100% dedicated to moving forward and your own happiness with these two significant things. And I absolutely, positively guarantee it's going to change your life. It's going to turn your life around. Now listen, if you need clinical counseling, if you need help from a psychologist or a pastor, professional help, by all means, go get it. By all means, go get it. What I'm saying is supplement yourself. Do these great things for yourself to help you move from a state of discouragement, despair, depression, anger, disappointment to a place of happiness and to a place of greater joy. It absolutely is within your ability to influence. All right? I'd love to hear from you and how this has affected you, and I'd love to give you an opportunity to join the Courageous Nation. Just text the word right now. Use your smartphone wisely. Text the word courage to this number, 24365. Just think about it as 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Text the word courage to 24365. And you'll join the Courageous Nation. And you'll also be notified anytime I release something new just like this or something like it that's going to help you move forward, whether it's a video, whether it's an article, whether it's an appearance. You're going to be among the first to know. That's how you join the Courageous Nation. It's absolutely priceless, and it'll change your life, okay? So I can't wait to hear how this episode has encouraged you, and I can't wait to see you in episode 40. Share this episode with your family and your friends. And if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, remember to check us out. Check out my page on YouTube, Michael Anthony Official on YouTube, and like it, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. In the meantime, I hope that you're happy. I hope that this has helped you. This is Michael Anthony reminding you to keep looking up. There's no place else worth looking, and keep moving forward.